Hello, viewers. This is Brother Jamala coming to you today with another topic that is very closely tied to what we've already talked about, and that is courage, respect, and likability. That's a word that I use, likability, just being likable in the context of our struggle as Africans. The Usually when I get on these channels, I like to kind of recap just slightly because I know everyone is not going to view all the lessons, in chronological order. So I just like to kind of briefly recap so that they'll know that's out there. If they're a first-time visitor, they'll know that these other topics are out there. So we talked earlier about self-love, self-hate, strength of character, and then resistance or the spirit of the fighter when we are in the context of liberation and struggle. And then also something about our spiritual lives. How do we orient our spiritual lives? Do we look at it as with our race first, our Black Africanness first, and then our spirituality or what you call our religion second, or is it the other way around? And I came to the point where we do the race first, not to say that we're putting religion and putting our relationship with God last, but it's the platform that we need in order to come together as a people, because we all share different faiths within the context of the nation that we live in, within the context of the community that we reside in, within the context of the tribe we reside in. So when I say first, I'm speaking in a sense of uniting on a common platform and a common struggle. And so the faith should not say because one's practicing one faith and one's practicing another that they're excluded because they don't pray like I do, they don't fast like I do, they don't worship. No, we all in this nation together. Most of the times when you have a nation of people, they all call themselves either Nigerian, they call themselves Togolese, or they call themselves American, they call themselves English, whatever the case is. But inside of the context of the ground that we live on or dwell on, we have our faiths and our different cultures and our different ethnicities. So I always like to go by the nation or where we're tied into, along with our racial makeup, because those usually stay constant, especially the racial makeup. So anyway, we talked about strength of character and all of that, so anybody can review those topics in the previous lessons. And now we're going to talk a little bit about courage and a little bit about respect, self-respect. And all of these are tied into the importance of struggling, and the importance of us being able to fight as a people and be able to unite. So the the area of in the last lessons we talked a little bit about why some of the weaknesses of characters happen with people of African descent. And we tied a lot of it into our past history of slavery and our past history of colonization. And these things have taught us, these situations have taught us how to be inferior or how to be subservient, having a total attitude of serving under oppression, not serving out of free will, but under someone standing over us. And in doing so, they set certain criteria and certain expectations of us and how we should conduct ourselves. And usually it's not as men and women, as African men and women really should be. Strong, mentally strong, backbone, composure, confident, courageous. Usually you were taught to be the opposite. placate, or what you call subservient, um, uh, just with an attitude of serving others. And this is where we learn to be maladaptive in our communities. And a lot of these things spill over into our current day families because it's a history that's been passed on from generation to generation. Some people have overcome it and they have been able to break out of that fear, that type of fear that's causes people to act that way because they're just trying to survive. They're just trying to keep from being assaulted. But the fear and the terror and the intimidation that really caused them to be that way in the first place is ever so present in this present day. Many times it's more subtle and covert, whereas back then it was more overt because it was law, it was legal. Now that it's not as legal, there's those tendencies, people with those tendencies that dictate people like that tend to hide. And so a lot of times their character was questionable and their integrity was questionable because of the way they subjected people under these harsh conditions. And they would learn to like you if you were cooperative with it, if you comply. And then they would hate you if you did not. That's the psychology of the oppressor. So when you were taught to do wrong, they liked you. When you were taught, if you for some reason decided to go against that, they didn't like you and you were punished. And so other Africans that witnessed these things saw what happened to someone else that looked so tragic that and it traumatized them to the point where they didn't want to do the same thing because they didn't want to receive the same reprisals and punishments. So they decide to follow suit and fall in line and stay in their place and keep their mouth shut. And they would even try to act like they were extremely happy in those situations when they were extremely depressed and upset. So these are things that cause us to be maladjusted and dysfunctional when we interact with our fellow man and when we interact with those that seem to have power over us. So what we want to do is come out of that inferiority complex that has been forced on us. And many people that never yielded to that were severely punished, even up into including getting lynched and hanged. So since that terror is in the mind of us as slave descendants or as those that were colonized, we have a tendency to not want to step over that line because of fear of being retaliated on, because there are many of us that think that a lot of that hasn't gone away. It's just hiding, laying low. So when we get into courage and respect, that is something that a person needs spite the dangers that could happen to them. So I'm going to read something here. It says, courage is a quality in man, a quality loved in man, no matter what form it assumes. And that's by a psychologist named J.L. Byerly. And he had some kind of book out there called The Psychology of Oppression. And somehow this book is on some Air Force base, but I couldn't locate it in the regular Google or anything, but it's just in my notes from the past. And so it says, no matter what form it assumes. So people love to see courage, no matter what form it assumes. It's just a quality in a person, and it's admired. And then there's another statement that courage isn't being unafraid. It's directly facing your fears and doing what's right, spite the fears. Okay, spite being afraid or whatever. So it's natural to be afraid because it's not about being unafraid, but it's to be able to face your fears regardless of the fear that you feel. That gets into being able to manage your fear. If you're a person that's afraid of heights, how do you eventually do it? Maybe through some coaching, or somebody eventually teaches you to overcome it, but you yourself have to be able to manage that fear. You have to figure out ways to keep it from causing you to become frozen or paralyzed, because it's about managing those fears. Not to say that you'll never feel the fear, but managing it. And so that's the way you have to be when you're in the African struggle, and you know the history and the tragedies that have happened to people. You have to be able to move forward despite those fears. Now, respect is something that I enjoy trying to have for myself, and trying to demand that or command that from other people, or command that from youth. Because respect, and friends, respect to me, and this is my personal belief, respect to me is more important than people liking me. I prefer to have your respect before I have your like toward me. And the reason for this is not just because of our past as African descendants, but to me, it establishes a sense of understanding between you, your friends, you and your enemies, that you do not want them to step past certain boundaries that may be disrespectful, or that may be historically disrespectful. You don't want to visit those old times, so you want to make sure that people who are of a different race respect your stand, and respect the man that you are, respect the boy that you are, or the girl that you are. And then, if you should choose, you can like me afterwards. But I want you to love me for who I am, rather than love me for who I am not. And I also rather you hate me for who I am than to love me for who I am not. And these are things that Africans need to be able to, Black Africans need to be able to practice, because this will help get you further down the road. If you only strive for people to like you, people to accept you, you're going to be in a lot of trouble, and you're going to be in a rude awakening. Now, it says a friend in the Bible must show himself friendly. So you want to be friendly, but you don't want to be a pushover, and you don't want to be a suck up, or you don't want to be used. Because once you allow that opening to be used like that, you could be used against your people easily. So respect is probably one of the things you want to go for. And then your courage is right there with it, because it takes courage to set boundaries on people, and it takes courage to stand up for something that you otherwise would be afraid about. And that separates you from others who placate. And remember, we were talking about on the plantation. A lot of this started on those slave plantations, and so we have to be overcomers. And then there's some people today that still have not been able to overcome that. There's some people over the decades and over the generations of children that have been born since slavery, since colonization, that the parents passed those passive behaviors onto their children by telling them, be careful because such and such is dangerous. Be careful because you'll be in a lot of trouble if you say the wrong thing to the wrong person. And those things are true, but we still have to be able to overcome those fears to the point where we can get our needs met and get our liberation and freedom at the expense of our decisions, and not because somebody is going to allow us because they're being nice to us. Sometimes we have to take, or we have to demand. And so I'm going to conclude this as part one. We'll go to part two on the same topic in our next discussion, and we'll get into more deeper things about the plantation psychology there, and how it parallels with today, and then how we can try to overcome that. So thanks for joining me, and I'll see you in a bit with part 2. God bless.